Hello again, and welcome to video number 4 in our unit on the demands and struggles in the colonies unit. Today, the essential question is, what were the consequences of the rebellions? If you think back to last class, we discussed some of the causes of the rebellions, and now we start looking to the actual rebellions and the consequences. Please be reminded the success criteria are as follows. You'll be able to indicate the main events of the rebellions in Lower Canada. You'll be able to name the recommendations made by Lord Durham in his report. You'll be able to indicate the boundaries of United Canada. And finally, you'll be able to explain the structure of government under the Act of Union of 1840. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Let's get started. Oh, on one final note, I do realize that I'm standing in water.
So before we actually answer the essential question, for today, let's take a couple of looks at some of the main events that took place during the rebellions. We first start with in 1837, as indicated here at the start of our timeline, 1837, you begin with the formation of the Fils de Liberté, which are the Sons of Freedom, and that is a group of individuals who would go to arms and fight against the Brits on behalf of the Parti Patriote. So these are some of those extremists from that radical wing. Around that time, however, the more moderate wing of the Parti Patriote, led by this man right here, who is Papineau, he was really encouraging people to continue to fight for their freedoms and to fight for equality and to fight for really a responsible government. However, he really encouraged people not to do so in a violent way. So he was really more about doing it through government. However, at that same time, a new leader emerged for the radical wing, and this was a man known as Wilfrid Nelson, and he really encouraged the Fils de Liberté and other soldiers to take arms and to fight for their rights against the Brits in the form of an actual aggressive rebellion. So in 1837, war begins, as indicated in this image, and this actually is a picture from 1837 at Saint Denis, where you can see the French actually defeating the British. So the first war was actually a successful one for the Parti Patriote. However, 2 days later, another battle took place at St. Charles. And in this one, you see very clearly a very organized and structured British army who have the high ground and easily conquer the Parti Patriote who are in the low ground. So immediately, 2 days later, you have a defeat for the French. Next, you have a big battle that took place at Saint-Eustache in 1837, which was once again a defeat for the French. So now we've had one victory and two defeats. Following that, we move now to 1838, a year after the rebellion had started, and now you have something that takes place, and that is another rebellion occurs. Once again, this rebellion does not go well. There's more war fought, and the British come out on top because they have a much stronger and better organized army. As a matter of fact, at that time, it's said that they had the strongest army in the world. So the French lose. The rebellions officially come to a close in 1838 with a public hanging of the patriots. Up here you can see there's 12 individuals being hanged in a public ceremony, and this was a real sign to everyone that the rebellions were officially over, and that if you were to counter the British or to oppose them, you faced the risk of being hanged in public. That was a real sign of power for the Brits, and it really sort of put an end to the rebellions. Okay, so at this point now, what I would like to do is I just want to take everyone's attention and talk a little bit about some of the reactions to the rebellions, because it's important to note that not everybody agreed with it. So, the very first thing that I just want to talk to you about, actually, just get rid of a little bit of that, because I want to leave just a little bit of space at the bottom. Okay, so the very first thing I want to talk to you about are some of the reactions to it. So you had reactions from the French-speaking Canadiens, and you had reactions from the British colonists to the rebellions. The important thing to note is that not everybody that was French-speaking, so the Canadiens, not everybody agreed. If you think back to the Parti Patriote, you had, like we said, a radical wing, and you had a more moderate wing. And this is important because when it came time to actually go to war and to be aggressive, the group of people in the Parti Patriote who agreed and favored going to war were the radicals, okay? So they agreed with it. The more moderate group actually didn't agree with going to war, and so it's just important to note that not every Canadien supported the rebellion. If you think of people like Papineau, who was the leader, he would have been the leader of the more moderate group, whereas somebody like Wilfred Nelson would have been a radical and encouraged people to go to war. In terms of the British colonists, it's also important to note that the vast majority, okay, most were against rebellion. Except for radicals, because there were some Anglophone radicals. In fact, that guy I just talked about, this man right here, Wilfred Nelson, he was actually a British colonist. Okay, so Nelson was one of those radicals. So it's just important to note that some British colonists, were also radical. Okay. But one thing that I just want to finish on when we talk about events, and then we're going to move on, is that everything I just discussed, from the reactions to the events, this is all the rebellions that were taking place where? In Lower Canada. Lower Canada. I just want to quickly talk about the fact that everything that took place in Lower Canada actually inspired a rebellion in Upper Canada, which we'll get to right now. So just quickly, let's talk a little bit about the rebellion that also took place in Upper Canada. Okay, so in Upper Canada, there was a rebellion by a group of people known as Reformers, and these are all English-speaking people. Okay, so the Reformers were also unhappy in their legislative assembly because they felt that a group known as the Family Compact held all the power in government, especially economically. And so the whole idea here is that the Reformers were fighting against the family, so it's a versus situation, Reformers versus the Family Compact. Basically, the Reformers wanted democracy, meaning they wanted to be able to elect and vote people in. The Family Compact had most of the power, and so this led to a rebellion. Just like we saw in the rebellions in Lower Canada, the rebellions in Upper Canada resulted in the Reformers quickly losing. But the important thing to take away, so they quickly lost. But the important thing to take away in the end, therefore, is that the rebellions in Lower Canada influenced the rebellions in Upper Canada. So there was an impact, which meant that what they were fighting for in Lower Canada meant there could have been an impact. It meant that it was inspiring people. I just wanted to show you that. Okay, so the rebellions now take place. They're over and done with, but let's talk about some more consequences. Well, one of them was a new governor was put in place, a man by the name of Lord Durham. If you think back to the old governor, that was Lord Gosford. He was the guy in charge of the British colony when the rebellions happened, and needless to say, they weren't very happy with them. So they put a new governor in place because they feared another rebellion. His job was to come up with a report where he would make recommendations to ensure that rebellions wouldn't happen again. So to do that, he had to make certain changes. He decided to finally put in place that thing that the French had wanted for so long, which was a responsible government. So that changed. Part of his report was the recommendation to also now unify or put back together Upper and Lower Canada. He also agreed to put in a single legislative assembly. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, he recommended the assimilation of everyone to British values. Assimilation means that French-speaking Canadiens would now take on British ways of life and culture. So all four of these are called the recommendations in Durham's report. So part of Lord Durham's recommendations was to unify the two Canadas. So if we take a look here, let's just show how the boundaries changed. So if we zoom in on what they now call the province of Canada, which used to be Upper and Lower Canada, we'll be able to see the change in boundaries. So you'll see a split right here, and that's what used to separate Upper and Lower Canada. Lower Canada, which was up here, is now referred to as Canada East, and down below, which was Upper Canada, is now officially called Canada West. Both of those together make up what they call the Province of Canada. So now we have a new boundary. So the important thing to take away from this is you will no longer be hearing Upper and Lower Canada. You will now be hearing us refer to things as Canada East and Canada West within the Province of Canada. Okay, so the very last thing we're going to talk about today is the political structure of United Canada after 1840. So, real quick, let's just take a look at this. This is 1791 and the signing of the Constitutional Act. You have the king in Britain who would have his government, the parliamentary government, who would then appoint their governor general. This much we know. Back in 1791, you had a split in the boundary, and you had two boundaries. You had Upper Canada, you had Lower Canada. Each group had their own governor who was appointed. He would then appoint his councils. Then you had legislative assemblies in both Lower and Upper Canada. Who put those people into power? The people, because they were able to vote. Now that's in the past. That's review. Now let's look at what changed, because now we fast forward to the Act of Union of 1840. So now you have a united Canada that has one government that is considered responsible, one responsible government. So the French got what they wanted. However, when we take a closer look at what actually took place, what you begin to find is this. The Governor General was still appointed. The governor still appointed his Executive Council, which had 8 members, and he appointed his Legislative Council, which had 24 members. So up to this point, absolutely nothing changed. When we look at the Legislative Assembly, we now only have one Legislative Assembly, which is a combination of members from Canada East and Canada West working together with one common voice. However, this wasn't great for people living in Canada East, which were the Lower Canada, French-speaking Canadiens. Why? Because now it was 42 members in each group, which, if you couldn't tell, was not a good thing, because before, the French actually had the majority of people in Legislative Assembly. Now it was completely even, which only furthered to benefit the British. You had less influence for the French, you had more influence for the British. Once again, a sign that the French now, more than ever, had the smallest voice they did in government.
Thanks for watching video number 4, but before we go, let's just recap that our essential question was what were the consequences of the rebellions, and that our success criteria are that you'll be able to indicate the main events of the rebellions in Lower Canada, name the recommendations made by Lord Durham in his report, indicate the boundaries of United Canada, and explain the structure of government under the Act of Union of 1840. I hope you enjoyed the video. Take care.